Dinosaurs are dead. We all know that. They went extinct about 66 million years ago when an asteroid slammed into Earth and wiped out 75% of all species on the planet, including the mighty T-Rex, the fearsome Spinosaurus, the graceful Brachiosaurus, and also, possibly, our favorite feathery friends, the birds. Birds, yes. Sorry, this is going to get weird. If you've been paying attention, you might be thinking, wait a minute, I thought birds were dinosaurs. I mean, we have bird bones in our fossil collections, and they're pretty clearly related. So if the asteroid killed off all the dinosaurs and birds are dinosaurs, then doesn't that mean that birds should have died off too? Well, hold your horses or your ornithomimuses, because there is a lot more to the story than meets the eye. It all starts with what we think dinosaurs looked like. When we hear the word dinosaur, we typically think of giant scaly monsters, like the mighty Tyrannosaurus rex, or the armored Stegosaurus, or the horned Triceratops. These are great for movie posters, but it turns out that these famously fearsome beasts may not have actually looked like this at all. In fact, thanks to some amazing fossil discoveries over the past few decades, we now know that many dinosaurs sported feathers. The first feathered dinosaur that was discovered was Sinosauropteryx. In 1996, this dino was only known from a single fossil, a skeleton so well preserved it even had imprints of feathers still attached. And while it looked kind of reptilian, it was clearly covered in downy feathers, which scientists think helped it stay warm. This find turned the world of paleontology on its head because no one had ever seen anything like this before. Was this a bird? A feathered reptile? What was it? Even more surprising, finds came in 2000 when a team of Chinese scientists uncovered a new species named Microraptor. Not only did it have feathers, it had 4 wings, 2 on each side, which would have allowed it to glide from tree to tree. And then there's Archaeopteryx. It was one of the first creatures we knew had feathers, although we first needed to study a few more specimens before we could be sure. But since its discovery in the mid-1800s, it has remained one of the most famous examples of a feathered dinosaur. These aren't the only 3 either. Since 1996, dozens of other species have been found with feathers, including some that we would never have guessed, like the terrifyingly huge feathered Utah raptor. Okay, so we know that some dinosaurs had feathers. Big deal, right? Well, the more scientists learned about these feathered dinos, the more they realized that the traditional view of dinosaurs needed revising. For starters, not all of them were gigantic. Yeah, the sauropods like Argentinosaurus and Diplodocus were supersized plant eaters, growing up to 26 meters long and weighing 77 tons. That's the size of a blue whale. But a lot of dinosaurs were actually small. The average ornithopod was only about the size of a turkey. Also, based on the evidence from these fossils, it seems like having feathers was the rule, not the exception. And not just little downy feathers either. Some dinosaurs like Ankylosaurus had long tail feathers that may have helped balance their bodies while they walked. And others like the Microraptor had huge flight feathers that may have let them soar through the air. There was even a dino named Archaeopteryx that looks like it could fly, except it was only about the size of a chicken. So it seems like feathers may have actually been a key characteristic of dinosaurs as a whole. But why? Some scientists think that feathers may have helped dinos regulate their body temperature. Others think they might have been used for attracting mates, scaring off rivals, or camouflaging from predators. Still, others think that they were used for display and communication. Basically, we don't really know. What we do know is that feathers probably weren't good for waterproofing because almost all dinosaurs lived on land. Plus, all dinosaurs laid eggs, and eggs need to dry out a bit in order to develop properly. So it's unlikely that feathers would have helped with conserving water. Also, many of these feathered dinos lived in relatively cool environments, like the frigid south of Chile or the temperate forests of China. So they wouldn't have needed feathers to stay warm. Feathers might have been useful for dinosaurs, but who came up with this idea? Well, the answer to that question will tell us whether birds are dinosaurs, Okay, so back to our feathered friends, The birds. Could they really be dinosaurs? Well, the answer depends on what you define as a dinosaur. So let's look at the science. In 2007, a paper published by a group of paleontologists reignited the debate over whether birds are dinosaurs. In it, the authors proposed that instead of thinking of birds as the last surviving dinosaurs, we should think of them as a distinct group altogether, separate from the lineage of dinosaurs. Their reasoning was that while birds do share a common ancestor with theropod dinosaurs like T-Rex and Velociraptor, the group that includes meat-eaters and some plant-eaters, like Ornithomimus, birds split off from this line of dinosaurs about 140 million years ago. Since then, they've accumulated so many genetic changes that they can't really be considered dinosaurs anymore. But if you ask me, this is where things get a little weird. You see, in the same year, another group of researchers argued that yes, birds are dinosaurs. Specifically, they're a type of theropod dinosaur. Their argument was based on the idea that evolution isn't a straight line, but rather more like a bush. Groups split off, but then they come back together again in unexpected ways. The authors of this study argued that instead of splitting off from theropods, birds evolved within them. So technically, that makes them dinosaurs. Now, this may sound like scientists arguing about nothing, but this debate matters because the answer helps us understand how evolution works and how living things are related to each other. For example, if birds are dinosaurs, it means that dinosaurs didn't end 66 million years ago. They're still around today. They just look different. But which scientists are right? If you ask me, both sides make some very good points. So maybe it's best to think of birds as dinosaurs and non-avian relatives of birds as honorary birds. And speaking of honorary birds, you could be an honorary member of SCI Show. Thanks for watching this episode, and thanks especially to our supporters. They help us make the videos that you love, which hopefully teach you something new every week.